Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for Sunday, June 29th. Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for Sunday, June 29th. Brought to you by Vunabaka.com, a new surf and water-based residential community in the island of Fiji. First up, let's take a look at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. And we're not going to take a look at current data. We're actually going to go back almost a week. We're very interested in low pressure that developed off Japan right in this area. Let's put this into motion and watch what happens as it builds on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday into Wednesday. 20-foot seas at the end of June on the dateline, making a clear path the whole way into the Gulf of Alaska, and then continuing to circulate with 16, 17-foot seas into Friday afternoon. This is interesting. Normally this whole area would be choked off with high pressure, and you would never get a low pressure making that sort of a traverse of the North Pacific. This is somewhat suggestive that perhaps El Nino is starting to get some traction in the atmosphere. And what's even more interesting is today there's yet more low pressure starting to develop on the same track. We'll put this into motion, and you see by Monday some activity starting to develop in the Gulf, another on the dateline, another off Japan. And we'll just roll this out for the whole week. You can see what happens. They don't really develop, but the interesting part is that they are there at all, that they continue to make it clearly through the channel the whole way over the dateline into the Gulf, and that they are coherent enough to actually get some traction on the ocean surface and generate seas. Here we are, 180 hours out, and still there's activity going on, not to mention tropical activity forecast. Now, this model doesn't do well at forecasting tropical systems, so it's not believable, but this whole scenario is looking much more like the sort of scenario that we'd want to see if El Nino were in fact making some imprint in the atmosphere. But of more immediate concern is what's going on in the South Pacific right now. Of interest, a strong storm in the far southeast Pacific, 50-foot seas targeting South America well. Otherwise, pretty benign pattern over the rest of the South Pacific. Let's dig into the details. First, we'll go take a look at jet stream level winds. As we've mentioned before, the jet stream is responsible for helping to fuel storm development in lower levels of the atmosphere. The jet stream, up around 30,000 feet, also directs storms when they form and their travel path. Right now, we have a trough. This supports circulation, lower levels of the atmosphere, 140 knot winds at the apex of the trough, lesser winds feeding up into it, but this is what's helping to fuel that storm off of southern Chile. Otherwise, we have a ridging pattern running down, about 67 south. Antarctic ice is at 65. So basically, the jet is running over the Ross ice shelf and Antarctic ice, and basically allowing no room for storm development in this area. Let's put it into motion. Just take a look here. So we're rolling out. We're into Tuesday. The trough that formed the big storm off of Chile is pretty much gone, pinched off, moving inland. A secondary trough tries to form, not particularly interesting. The ridge continues in the west. Then we get this really split pattern here. Cutoff. This would be a cutoff low or a cutoff trough here. Notice most of the energy here is still working into Antarctica, so that kind of limits the ability of anything to form here, but still there is that potential. We'll put it into motion, and that trough continues off of New Zealand into late Thursday and Friday, and then things get kind of weak. Another cutoff trough continues to feed that area, but with much less wind, and otherwise you have this big ridge that just completely locks down the South Pacific, and we just roll it out here to 180 hours, no change, big split, and that's about the end of it. Next, we'll take a look at surface level pressure. Differences in pressure generate wind. Wind, when it is blowing strong enough over the ocean's surface for a long enough period of time in one direction, generates raw seas, which as they propagate away from the source of the wind results in swell, which of course results in surf. So what we're looking for is areas of strong winds. We're actually going back in time. Friday. Let's put it into motion. We're looking at the development of the storm off of Chile. We're into Friday night, small area 50 knot winds, good size area, 45 knot winds, and that builds rapidly into Saturday. Again, 45 to 50 knot winds, and then by midday Saturday, 55 knot winds here. Continually put that into motion. A larger area, 50 knot winds with 55 knot winds embedded in it, all aimed right up the Great Circle paths here to, well, we'll have, there's Peru for sure, and relative to Southern California, not so much. Most of it's cutting across the Great Circle paths. In fact, we could roll this back. There is some fetch early in this system's life right here, and that is pushing up the, almost 190 degree path on into about, when was that, Saturday or so, and then this is what, about the 180 degree path, and then it's out of there before it really blows up. But anyway, back to Chile, and the system peaked out there Sunday morning, 55 knot winds. Pretty good size area, pretty much targeting this entire area. You could even get well up into Puerto Escondido, and it looks like decent energy there. But by this point in time, it's all pretty much cutting across the Great Circle Pass. Actually, there's a little bit of fetch right here. What is that, about 174, 75 or so into Southern California. So we'll take a look at the significant wave height charts in a minute. Anyway, that system is to peter out by Monday morning and all but gone. And then we roll out, look at the rest of the Pacific Ocean. Kind of not a whole lot going on. There was some rumors, here we go, of this little cutoff low developing off of North New Zealand on Thursday, 45. Look at a tiny area of 55 knot winds. And then it starts falling south. And then that's pretty much the end of it. So let's roll this out. Look at significant wave heights. We're actually going back in time here. Saturday, 30-foot seas developing, building rapidly to 39 feet on midday Saturday and 40 feet into Saturday night. Relative to Southern California, in the 180 degree Great Circle Path. Northern California, not so much, barely. Sideband energy possible, only at the most exposed breaks. It would be probably 180. We'll actually go back here. A little bit greater than 180, but for the most part, not so much. Costa Rica, of course, and Peru, of course. Okay, anyway, put this into motion. The system peaks out there Sunday 18Z, 50-foot seas, and then it starts to decay while pushing towards Chile and Peru. Nice, powerful system, exactly what you'd want to see for large swell to result. 50-foot seas, you'll get 25-second period more than likely over a little bit of distance. So small size, but a lot of energy, max, and then probably most energy in the 20-second period frequency range. Anyway, we put this into motion, continuing out, another little secondary pulse. We saw a trough and a little bit of low pressure there, but nothing too dramatic. And then we continue rolling it out, and here's this little system cut off low, projecting, that's 36 to 38 foot seas on Friday. But notice, almost falling south. But here, we'll get some Great Circle Pass on here. Relative to Hawaii, some energy into Hawaii. Relative to Southern California, yes, and unshadowed. And Northern California, yes, and unshadowed, but an extremely small, instead of throwing a boulder into a pond to get waves, we're throwing a pebble here. So the hopes aren't real high that a large, even decent-sized swell will result, especially if it's falling south and away from our main targets. Anyway, put that into motion. We're into 168 hours out. Continued low pressure and some sort of, seas in the 20 or so foot range, but you really need 26, 28 foot seas to get about a 15-second period, 16-second period swell. And that is what sort of period you need to really survive the journey up into California and all these targets here with any size associated with it. So that's sort of it for the week. For sure, big swell, South America, sideband energy up into California, Southern California for sure, Northern California more exposed breaks. but the main targets are well south of there, and then perhaps a little cutoff low off New Zealand, but not a whole lot expected from that. Let's go look at the longer term data. As we've been talking about for months now, possible development of El Nino. We'll first take a look at the Southern Oscillation Index. Negative numbers represent the active phase of the MJO. If they're negative long enough, they represent the development of El Nino. We have little pockets of negative numbers finally showing up in the Southern Oscillation Index. The best run here is since June 22nd. There's been low pressure in the area of Tahiti. The SOI is actually the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia and Tahiti. The negative numbers have been driven by low pressure near Tahiti, and there's more yet to come if you look at the models. This is so the daily average is now minus 5.62. The 30-day running average is dead neutral. The 90-day average is approaching neutral at 3.45. So this is good, but nothing that clearly indicates El Nino at all. Next, we'll take a look at anomalies, wind anomalies on the equator, variations from normal. Westerly anomalies is what you want to see. These are what generate Kelvin waves, and in fact we now finally have westerly anomalies. After about a week-long run of easterly anomalies, we're back in a better place. Not strong anomalies, but modest, we'll call them. Just a couple of degrees either side of the equator is what you want to see. Going towards the dateline, there's Australia, of course, and it's neutral on the dateline, and then we roll it on out towards the Galapagos, and pretty much neutral the rest of the way across the Pacific. Next, we'll go a week out, and what it appears to be is weak easterly anomalies, but that's more sort of associated with some sort of tropical activity here. Notice westerly anomalies well south of the equator in this region, but overall the trend is pretty much neutral. A little bit of easterly anomalies showing up here almost south of Hawaii, and then also continuing even beyond. Here's Hawaii here, a little bit of easterly anomalies, and then back to neutral towards the Galapagos. We're not too concerned with these easterly anomalies at the moment, but it is something to keep our eye on. Next, we'll take a look at the longer term models. The statistical model here suggests the yellows and the oranges here are the inactive phase of the MJO, which would be easterly anomalies. So they're hinting at this, but not really believable. The dynamic model actually shows what was an inactive phase, and they were showing this very strong, this model was for past week or more. It's backed off completely, and even hints of an inactive phase. So the net result is probably dead neutral for, this is over the next 15 days, so probably a dead neutral pattern for the next 2 weeks. And this is exactly what one would expect if El Nino were developing. The MJO tends to disappear. You tend to have just no coherent pattern at all, and what results though is you get this sort of consistent westerly anomaly that develops in the far west Pacific, and that continues. That's what creates Kelvin waves. That pushes warm water at depth from the equator here up off of the Galapagos Island. When that warm water erupts on the surface, then you get this signature warm pool that develops here, and we'll get more into that in a minute. So, and then this is the super long-term upper level model. Green suggests the active phase of the MJO, the oranges and yellows, the inactive phase. This would also suggest easterly anomalies. So this model has consistently been showing this inactive phase pushing through the Pacific the entire month of July. The question is it believable or not? This model has not had a great track record, honestly. So we're actually beginning to become more hopeful that this is, again, hype from the model. It doesn't have a handle on what's going on, but we'll continue to be cautious and say if this does develop, then there is a potential for easterly anomalies and a potential to shut down the warm water pump to the East Pacific. But for now, it is what it is. We'll see what happens. Next, sea surface temperature anomalies. Notice, warm, well warm above normal temperatures. Galapagos, Peru, Central America. This is a classic El Nino signature. So clearly warm water is building up. This is the result of multiple westerly wind bursts that went December, January, February, March, April, created massive Kelvin wave, traveled the whole way at depth down about 150 meters under the equator, the whole way off of the Galapagos in Ecuador, and has been erupting for since sometime in May now, and clearly the ocean is getting much, much warmer. The question is it been warm enough, long enough to start having an effect on the atmosphere above it? The hope is that it will, and that when that happens, that will basically shut down the trades in this area, and what you'll end up with is westerly anomalies, and then the warm water pump will just start going, and it'll push yet more warm water at depth into this area and continue to keep this area heated. Now the deal is it takes about 2.5 to 3 months for a Kelvin wave generated here to reach here. Well, that Kelvin wave finished being produced in the late March, early April time frame. All the warm water is queued up and is erupting now, but we think the peak of that eruption has happened this week. And what's going to happen is there isn't a whole lot more left in the pipe to keep continuing the heating here. And at some point, these temperatures are going to start to recede. What you need is more westerly winds to create another Kelvin wave to refuel this pocket of warm water so it can continue to affect the atmosphere above it. But as of right now, without westerly winds, let's say they started today, it'll take 3 months for that Kelvin wave to make it over here. So you're into the end of September. And if this pocket starts cooling off, it'll have less influence on the atmosphere, and then that means whatever El Nino we get won't be as powerful or might not form at all. Remember, 2012, this exact same scenario happened. The Kelvin wave wasn't nearly as big, but we had a good area of warm water building up here, and then in July the whole thing shut down, and by come the winter it was back to neutral, if not tending cold waters here. We don't want that to happen, but you know, we have to be honest, it's a possibility. Next, let's take a look at surface level winds. These are anomalies from normal. Clearly these are pretty hefty anomalies here. This is at the surface. The models we looked at before were at 850 millibars. That's up in the atmosphere about 4,500 feet. This wind data is derived from buoys that are on the ocean surface. Clearly there is westerly anomalies in this area. That is good news. We need it. It needs to continue though. This is JSON2 data showing the variation in actual sea height. Okay, pockets of yellows and reds are sea heights above normal, 5 centimeters in this area, and that suggests warm water at depth. This is the area that we're specifically interested in because it shows there's literally no warm water from the date line to about 130 or 135 west. And so this suggests that whatever Kelvin wave or warm water is left from the Kelvin wave is confined to a small area. We want to see more developing here. In fact, there's negative anomalies here suggesting that the pipe has in fact closed off, and not that there's cold water, but just there's no more warm water flowing this way. So we need to open up that pipe immediately. And here's another view of the same thing. So this is actual sea surface temperatures at depth, down 300 meters. This is the West Pacific. This is the East Pacific. And it's the anomalies that we're interested in. Notice almost 5 degree anomalies here. And this is basically the Galapagos Island right here, and Ecuador is off the chart a little bit. But this is the remaining energy from the Kelvin waves that were generated January, February, March, and April. Still very respectable warm water here. But notice there's really nothing flowing from around the date line in there. There is a little bit of pocket of 1 degree anomalies here. And it's not to say that it's completely closed off, but there's just really nothing flowing. It's a rather benign flow at this point in time. We need something to force more warm water. We've sort of beaten that drum to death here, but that is the truth of the matter. And here's yet another view of the same thing. Notice it's pure neutral temperatures right in here. Little pocket here. So different. Some of this model's dated because some of this data is modeled because there's not sensors over the entire Pacific Ocean at depth, but this is probably a very reasonable representation of what's going on. This is the warm water that'll continue to gurgle up for probably a month and a half, 2 months, something like that. But we need more behind it to recharge once this all gurgles up. So due to this developing situation, we became very interested in what's the status of winds. These aren't anomalies, these are actual winds in the West Pacific. The date line is here. We actually extended this model further to the west. We did some research and pretty much found Kelvin wave. The winds that generate Kelvin waves, probably the furthest to the west that those winds start having an impact is about 140 east, so we extended this a little bit that way. We'll roll this out, just to see. So here's what we would consider trades, in the 15 knot range. These are actually 10 or so, or even less, but notice dead air pretty much in here. Let's just roll this out and see what happens for the next week. The dead air continues. We get a little bit more of easterly wind starting to build here, even west of the date line. Continue to put that motion. More dead air. And then this is interesting. Come about 72 hours out, the trades really start collapsing even out to the date line and beyond. Let's see if it holds. Actually, look up, and there we go. We're into 114 hours. Looks like the trades return, and they're blowing the whole way into 165 east. But look at that. Oh, interesting. 174, 180 hours out. Completely dead winds here. So the pattern sort of fluctuates, but clearly it seems like at least for the next week there'll be less than normal winds in this area, which would probably result in westerly anomalies. Again, it's all forecast data. Who knows what's really going to happen, but at least it isn't clearly trades in this area. So that provides some encouragement and hopes that another Kelvin wave could be generated. We're now going to take a look at zoomed in high-res sea surface temperature data off of Peru. What we have been seeing right in these areas where these little pockets, see that color, that 4 and above degrees, there were these little pockets of very deep brownish red. They're all gone now. So in the past week, basically, the warmest of the warm temperatures aren't there anymore. And that's why we're saying we think the Kelvin wave, the peak of the Kelvin wave has hit, and we're sort of on the back side of it now. There's still probably a month or more's worth of water there. But again, this is what gets us around to saying, temperatures are going to probably start backing off in this area, and we need more warm water in the pipe. And the last data point, this is the Pacific countercurrent, both actual speed and anomalies. And what you see here is easterly anomalies and actual easterly speed. This is the area where we had east winds blowing a week ago or more, and they blew for a week. We're hoping that this is as of June 22nd, so this was right in the middle of that easterly wind burst, we'll call it. But if we really had El Nino going, you would never see this. You would see westerly anomalies, actual westerly current flow, also trying to push warm water into the building pool over here. But that's not happening. We have just a tiny area of westerly anomalies here around the date line, or actual westerly current flow, but nothing too strong and not even really any anomalies. So this is definitely concerning. We'll watch it for the next week or two. We're hoping that something develops that would actually sort of reverse this. But if this continues to happen, what we believe is it'll just suck all the warm water that's here, push it back to the West Pacific, and the whole thing's over, and that's it. And by a couple months out, we'll be back to normal water temperatures here, and that will not, do anything to enhance the atmosphere, to enhance the jet stream, or to promote the formation of El Nino. So this is basically the one fly in the ointment, along with sort of a lack of warm water in the pipe and a lack of westerly winds. We really need some sort of feedback loop to get developed here, driven by warm water that is currently off the Galapagos in Ecuador, but we're not seeing that at the moment. So this is a watch and monitor sort of situation. The models are somewhat favorable, but who knows? How much does anyone want to believe a model a week out, much less a month out? So kind of something to keep in the back of your mind. And the final data point in our tour is the output from the CFS version 2 Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature forecast. showing 1 degree anomalies in August in the Nino 3.4 region, building to 1.5. This would be classic El Nino, moderate grade El Nino, but you kind of wonder how the model can say this given all the other data that we've just talked about. So, you know, maybe we're a little bit too close to the forest looking at the trees, but at this point in time, it's something to be somewhat concerned about. So to wrap it up for now, big storm, far southeast Pacific, swell for sure for Central America, sideband energy up into Southern California, maybe some for Northern California, maybe a small system off New Zealand late in the week. And of course there's wind swells still in the forecast for Northern California. So there's rideable waves expected, nothing off the charts unless you get down towards Mexico in that way for next week. But it's summertime, take what you can get. The other bit is El Nino's trying to develop. There's some flies in the ointment. We're not quite sure how that's going to play out, but something to certainly keep watching. And we want to thank our sponsor, vunabaca.com. Go check them out on the web, vunabaca.com, the new residential community in the Fiji Islands. So that's it for now. We'll do this again next week, same time, same channel. Go get some surf, get some waves, have fun. See you. Bye.